Welcome back as we get ready to head into week 3. And week 2 brought us some good games across the board. We had some stunners with Milledgeville and Forreston going to overtime. Milledgeville pulling that one out. We had what looked to be a rout in place against Lena Winslow and Orangeville, only to watch Orangeville come back in the second half and make a game out of that one. EPC and Amboy played with each other very well through the first half, and then
Galena stumped West Carroll.
And Galena put the skunker out on the Thunder, but overall it was a very good week. We were able to cover 5 of the 7 games, which was a lot of fun. Long day, obviously, for Saturday, but it got us where we need to be as far as picking up a lot of teams, seeing a lot of coverage, getting a lot of games in, and of course getting a better feel for what we have going forward into week 3 as well.
It's definitely nice, especially for you taking in all those games that everything was centrally located, at least in Freeport. So while it's been kind of a downer year in terms of can we play at home, can we not play at home, I mean, it's been beneficial for those that at least want to see more games.
Right, exactly. And that, like you said, I mean, you go to Freeport and you got a doubleheader basically at 10 o'clock, 3 o'clock. I mean, you had time to go and get lunch before the game. Even if you couldn't really get into the game, you had the opportunity to at least sit on the sidewalk, which we did see quite a few people do that through the course of both games. Not as many as I expected for having some high school football going on, but there was still a good amount.
No, the school's allowed, visitors, so,
Correct, yeah. When you can allow fans from both sides, it does help out. Going into week 3, we have, again, another good slate of games here. Some games that could be nail-biters, other games that are still somewhat of intriguing matchups to see what is going to happen. We have a game of unbeatens as well as the top of the South, and Aquin and Milledgeville square off against each other on Saturday afternoon. Our game of the week is going to be Orangeville and Galena. So, Orangeville has been right there in the top 15 of the state rankings all year long. Galena, not too surprisingly, off to a 2-0 start, but the fashion in which they've done it is pretty surprising. So it'll be interesting to talk about that matchup when we get to it. Dakota and Du-Pec is a good rematch of last season when Dakota did beat Du-Pec, one of the teams that Du-Pec did lose to that was not of a winning record. And then we have the Lena Winslow and East Dubuque matchup, which pits Coach Aaron as tutor against Joe Edler as former pupil. And that'll be interesting to see what East Dubuque can do with Lena Winslow as well, and we'll break down that game. And I was really interested to see how well Rockford Christian hung with Aquin as well. And they get a good chance at a W this week with Stockton. And, of course, Stockton coming in at winless. That'll be a big game for them to get in the win column as well.
I'm ready to get this kicked off.
All right, let's get started.
All right, well, our first matchup, it takes us over to Stockton at John O'Boyle Field on Friday at 7 p.m. Rockford Christian, Stockton Blackhawks. Let's get into it.
All right. Well, obviously last week Rockford Christian played Aquin, lost 61-28, but they put up a good fight against the Bulldogs. There was obviously never any quit in that game out of the Royal Lions, which was great to see. Stockton lost to Du-Pec 28-7 in a game that many felt would have been a little bit closer. Started off very close at the half, but then Du-Pec opened up the floodgates in the second half to pull away in that one. Obviously, this is the first time these two teams are meeting against each other, so again, we have a lot of unfamiliarities going on in this matchup, but it should be a lot of fun to see what happens as you have Rockford Christian who wants to throw the ball against Stockton who wants to run the ball.
Oh, right there, you make a great point. You saw the Rockford Christian Aquin game, and you noted that Rockford Christian really had a nice pass game, but they struggled with the run. What can they do this week?
Well, it's one of those areas of concern where you have to be able to get your line moving. I mean, anybody will tell you that everything starts up front, and I mean, while it seems cliche, it's also the truth. And what they need to do is they need to be solid on their offensive line. Aquin was able to get through on their pass rush, like we had seen the week before against Du-Pec, which is speaking volumes to the strength of Aquin's defensive line. But Rockford Christian couldn't contain it much. What they could do though is when they were given the amount of time, they could definitely throw the ball. Their quarterback, Caden Nordquist, was very accurate, actually, going 23 for 30 in the game, threw for 274 yards against the Bulldogs. His primary target was wide receiver Isaiah Johnson, who we talked about last week as well when we were breaking down the Royal Lions. And he had some big pass plays as well to Gage Weeby, who hauled in like 6 passes for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. So they're very effective there. It'd be nice to see them be able to get Noah Ross the ball more than they were able to, and a lot of that is credit to the Bulldogs for shutting it down. But if they can get the ground game going with the pass game, they can be very formidable for a lot of teams in the NUIC.
So on the flip side, Stockton's always known for their tough running game, but they've had some inconsistent line play.
Yeah, Stockton definitely needs to clean up the line play. Obviously, you have the backs in Hilly, Andrew Haas, and of course the leading rusher for the Blackhawks and Jason Herman. And the Blackhawks have struggled turning the ball over, primarily in the pass game. I think they've thrown 5 interceptions over the last 2 weeks. So they got to clean that up a bit. Obviously, the offensive line play has struggled a bit, but to Coach Lightson's credit, he hasn't been able to start the same offensive line in back-to-back weeks due to COVID concerns. Nothing big with the team itself, so it's not an outbreak, but when you have certain guys that are out on protocol, it definitely...
It switches up the game plan.
Yeah, and that's where Stockton's struggling at right now. They got to get that cohesiveness. But once they do, they have a lot going for them. I mean, while their backfield is very experienced, their quarterback is not. Their offensive line is young, and they're not very big, but they're fast. I mean, they're still the Stockton Blackhawks. They're still very fun to watch, and I think if they can shore up that offensive line, get the ball moving, Stockton's still going to be a tough team to go up against.
So you've seen both teams play. Who do you have for this week?
It's funny that you asked that.
I ask that every week.
I know, but I was tossing this one around in my head earlier because I really didn't know. But I'm going to go with the Blackhawks. I think that they have enough experience in the defensive backfield to help hone in on the pass offense from Rockford Christian.
I will also agree with you, and I think that once getting all their stuff sorted out, that I think that they're gonna come back in, and we're not gonna be surprised. Our first North matchup of the night features Lee Wynn at East Dubuque, and that'll be played at Dubuque Senior High School at 7 p.m. on Friday night. And like you touched on in the opening segment, it's going to be cool to see Coach A versus Coach Edler.
It is going to be an interesting matchup. Obviously, Edler was the quarterback for Coach Aaron's first state championship team at Lena Winslow back in 2010. And as we've discussed before, Edler going on to coach with Orangeville, and now he's the head man at East Dubuque. Great to see him already pick up his first win of the year this past weekend. Or first win of the year, first win of his career, I should say. But yeah, he gets a great opportunity to go up against Coach A, and I'm sure it's going to be a blast for them as far as that is concerned. The game, on the other hand, is going to be a little bit different approach.
Yeah. Lewin got off to a fast start last week against Orangeville, but kind of dwindled in the second. How do they get consistency on offense with the loss of Roby?
Well, and that's a good question. So I was actually very surprised and excited to see how well Lena Winslow played in the first half of that game against Orangeville, considering the fact that Roby and Dunker were both out. And they got off to a great start. I mean, they scored on every offensive series that they had. Granted, they did capitalize on some Orangeville mistakes that made it very easy for Lena Winslow to score, doing what Lena Winslow does. But in the second half, Orangeville really put the clamps down. Their special teams came up big against Lena Winslow, especially on the punts, as Baker got 2 big block punts that led to Orangeville scores. And Lena Winslow, you can tell, isn't dynamic enough without Roby. So what they have to do is they have to stay consistent in their line play. They can't have dumb penalties, and they have to play consistent. And as long as they can do that, like I've said, Lena Winslow is still Lena Winslow. They're a very well-coached team. They're very disciplined more times than not. They just got to fix those mistakes, and they can make things happen.
Likewise, East Dubuque. They are still inconsistent on offense with the special teams and the defense coming up big.
Yeah, East Dubuque has come up huge on special teams with a couple kick returns, punt return, defense. They've had a couple interception returns, but it is in the offensive game where they have some issues. And again, for them, the same story. It starts up front. They have to get that consistent line play moving. I'm actually excited because this is the matchup I'm going to go see because I want to see what East Dubuque can do. Obviously, we know they have a lot of athletes coming up. They're junior dominated. I want to see what they can do against a good, powerful offense like Lena Winslow. And obviously, part of it's the Coach Aaron and Coach Edler effect, too. I want to see that breakdown. But East Dubuque needs to get more offense out of Sam Huntington in the backfield. All you got to do is give him a sliver of room and he's going to be gone, but he's got to have that opportunity to get out there. Likewise, you get Sam Bowman enough protection, he can hit his men like Declan Schemmel, who is a very dangerous athlete all over the place. And again, like we said, you get Ben Montag in that passing game as well, and get Will Kiefer going, and you can make a lot of things happen in this offense, but you got to have that time to be able to progress it. So they need to get some big play up front from Connor Miller and Ben Trussell and the gang up front, and see what happens there. But this is going to be a fun matchup.
I was going to say, it definitely, I think, will be a matchup to see, especially with the likes of, Max Ament and Maddox Sargent and Cole Gerber, on the D-line up against that offense.
Gerber played lights out against Orangeville. He was very impressive last week, so I'm really interested to see what he can carry over this week.
Who are you taking?
I got to take Lena Winslow. They're the front runners for a reason, and until somebody from the NUIC beats them, they're my pick.
I like that. I like that answer a lot. Make it 2. All right, our last matchup for the North Division takes us to Auburn High School at 11 a.m. on Saturday, and it's going to be the Dakota Indians versus the Du-Pec Rivermen.
Yeah, it's great that Du-Pec was able to set this up with all their home games being at Wyeth Stadium. It was obviously it gets a bad rep, but very cool place to have a football game, I think. But here we are, Dakota, Du-Pec. Obviously, Dakota lost to East Dubuque last week, 28-7. Du-Pec beat Stockton by the same score, 28-7. Last season, Dakota won this game 28-20 in Week 3, which was a big win for Dakota, and at the same time, wasn't really a debilitating loss for Du-Pec, but kind of showed that, hey, you guys need to get a line going here.
Dakota's fairly young, and they're under a new offense. How can they develop into that?
Well, there's a lot of, questions around, man, is Dakota really falling off that far? And, while you may end up going 1-4, 0-5, 2-3, somewhere in that ballpark, it's not that bad.
No, this is the year to do it.
Right. I mean, you're not playing for anything this year. You're playing to get better. You're playing for that opportunity to play. And Coach Freeze taking the opportunity to install a new offense. Like you said, he's got a lot of youth that he's trying to get developed. And, playing some of these good teams, I mean, they got a boat-loaded schedule. It's not easy. Basically everybody they play is ranked. They just had East Dubuque, which was probably going to be their, for lack of better phrasing, their easiest opponent of the season. The gauntlet only comes further. You have Du-Pec now, Lewin, Orangeville, and then Stockton. So, what they're doing is not bad. You're setting yourself up for the fall. If you have a lot of sophomores and juniors playing right now, why not get them developed? Because in the fall, they're going to be your juniors and seniors that are leading your team.
Exactly. It's no secret, Dubuque has been hot in the past game under Hunter Hoffman. How were they able to exploit, or how can they exploit more of a run game going into this next week?
Well, one of the things that they were able to utilize last week was Jacob Fowler, who is a transfer who came in for his senior year, I believe from Winnebago, transferred into Pecatonica. Dynamite athlete, too. I've seen him in the gym. Very explosive talent, and you could see that on the field in the opportunities that he was given. He could make some plays, and it goes back to the weakest spot for Dubuque right now is their offensive line. They still got to build that offensive line. Obviously, they were able to give Hoffman more protection this past week. He threw for 303 yards and 3 touchdowns and just really picked apart the defense left and right. You look at his stats against Aquin, he was almost at 62%. 23 for 35 last week is almost the same. He's above that 60 percentile. So very accurate in his attempts. And, like you said, they're very hot. If they can get the run game going to mix in the pass, they can start throwing off some of these defenses that are trying to sell out on the pass play.
What are you taking?
Oh, well, I always say experience beats youth and speed beats slow. And
very.
Dubuque is very fast. They're playing on turf, and they have the most experience. I'm taking the Rivermen.
I like your theories there. I also have Dubuque winning this matchup. Our first South matchup takes us to EPC at West Carroll, except we're not going to play Mount Carroll, and we're not, going to play in Savannah. We're going to Freeport High School, 2 p.m. on Saturday.
Yeah, so obviously another game to pick up at Pretzel Stadium, like you said. Obviously last week EPC came away with a 30-13 win over Amboy. West Carroll faced what's becoming the gauntlet of Galena now, losing 53-0. Last season, this game was a great matchup where EPC won 8-0 in week 3. Obviously, West Carroll eventually went on to the playoffs, though. EPC was left at home to watch. New players both sides of the field, new coach on one side of the field. Both teams, so far have not really played up to the level that we thought that they could play early in the season. So we'll see how this shakes up.
Well, segue right off of that, EPC plays much better than their stats show. How can they develop their game plan coming into this next week?
Well, it's one of those things. You see EPC in person, you're like, man, they look the part. They're big. They do have speed. They have athleticism. They just got to literally get it put all together. And, maybe COVID is part of the problem here. Maybe some of these kids got a little lackadaisical in the off season, which how could you blame them? You weren't sure what was going to happen. But if you want to play and you want to get going, you got to stay active. And Eastland has a very good strength program, and more times than not, they're always including pro cities. That way they can get the football team built up and ready to go. And what they got to do is they just got to formulate a plan that they can stick to it and be effective. You have a new QB in Kellen Hensey, which we discussed last week, and you have to give him as an athlete the opportunity to make plays, but at the same time, you have to make the play calls effective and conducive so he can make those decisions quickly without having to think too much.
So West Carroll had kind of a rough go last week. They're learning a new offense. It's a young team. What can the veterans, the juniors and the seniors, do to help get them going in the right direction?
Well, you need some guys like Keldon McCombie and Alex Moll and Devin Davis to kind of take hold of this team. To me, those are your studs that are returning, right? You got to be able to take this team over and get them going in the right direction. Start leading some of these guys to understand what it is to be West Carroll. Now, one of the things that they have going against them is they have a new coach. Not that that's a bad thing, but everything's new, what you're trying to learn, what you're trying to process. And maybe some things are more simplified as well. We know that West Carroll is suffering from some numbers, so there's going to be some guys that are going to get different experience levels. And sometimes that can affect you too, because maybe some kids aren't ready for that varsity level experience just yet. But, you know, again, for West Carroll, it's one of those opportunities similar like we were talking about Dakota. Get into the game, work on the things that you can develop, and try to get better for the fall. And right now, that's where we're looking at West Carroll being.
I do think this week EPC gets it put together, and I think that they get a win.
I do too.
Another win.
I do too. I think EPC can get it put together. Feed crowd the ball, man. Get your leading rusher the ball a little bit more. Get them going. Get that front line play going, and obviously make some room for Hensley and make some plays to the Baber boys and some other guys as well. So excited for this matchup to see how it transpires. But I do like the Cats.
Our next South matchup takes us down to Amboy Friday night at 7 o'clock for the Forreston Cardinals versus the Amboy Clippers.
Yeah, both teams obviously come in after their first week of play, and both of them took some losses on the chin, but both of them were in their ball games that they played, which is what you hope
That's all
to
you
expect.
could ask for, yeah.
And obviously, Forreston lost to Milledgeville in overtime, 14-12. Amboy lost to EPC 30-13. Last season, Forreston won this game 40-7 in week 3. But you know, this is one of those matchups. I think that with the experience that Amboy brings back, could really help turn that score around and make this more of a competitive ball game this time around.
Like you said, both teams played their first game, so no doubt you're going to have those first game jitters. The Cards, how can they rebound from a performance where they committed quite a few mistakes on drives that put them in a longer situation?
Yeah, Forreston suffered a lot against Milledgeville on what you call the drive killer penalties. And early in the game, you know, you could tell Forreston was the more dominant team early. But as the game wore on and you kept Milledgeville around, Milledgeville's one of those teams, man. They're scrappy. They're fighters. They're not going to stop. They have a great coaching staff that knows how to make adjustments. And in the second half, they adjusted to Forreston very well. And in the fourth quarter, Milledgeville took over the fourth quarter, and that's what led to the tie. And then in overtime, Milledgeville took care of business. And, you know, you got to be able to take care of things as they're going in your way. When you have the momentum, you got to stay on it. And Forreston made too many stupid mistakes that cost them yardage and put them in bad long yardage situations that forced them to punt more times than what they're used to punting. And, you know, just if they can clean those items up, granted they have, you know, we talked about it in long term, but they have guys that are new to the varsity level, but the system's the same. You know, Forreston's still doing Forreston football, and they do it very effectively. But they got to get their blocks down, and they got to be smart about doing it. They can't have the holding penalties. They can't have the unsportsmanlike conduct penalties. They just can't do the dumb things.
with Forreston's youth, I guess I'll play off of that. Amboy, the Clippers, they have some experience. They hung with the Wildcats for the first half, and the kickoff return and an interception kind of flushed that.
It did, and you got to look at what the Clippers do. Obviously, with Lane Bull quarterback, he played quarterback last year as well. You can do some things, especially when you got a tight end like Sean Fitzpatrick, and then you got some other guys that can make some plays as well in Brady Jones and Preston Hinkle. Hinkle is a big-time returner as well for the Clippers. If you get your offense going, obviously I haven't had a chance. Amboy is one of the few teams I have not seen yet, so I'm not exactly sure what Coach Payne's offense is doing currently, but I know that they're throwing the ball based off the stats that they have, so they are kind of staying to that spread type offense, which is fine. It's probably what they have to do. You just got to make sure that you're hitting those quick outs or quick slants, whatever you're deciding to call. And we know that Amboy likes to run somewhat of a pistol option offense out of what they run anyway. Be effective at the misperception and get your blocks down in the gaps that you have. And if you can do that, you can make some things happen. I think, like I said, this game's going to be closer than last year or any game that we've seen Forreston and Amboy play. I do like the Cardinals in this one.
I also like the Cardinals in this one. I do think that they clean their mistakes up and get a W. Our last South matchup for the night takes us to Milledgeville, Saturday, 1 p.m. Aquin Bulldogs versus the Milledgeville Missiles.
Yes, so obviously we have Aquin winning against Rockford Christian 61-28, and Milledgeville beating Forreston in overtime 14-12. Obviously, last season when these two teams played, it was Aquin winning 42-14 in week 3. Again, we have what we talked about, right? The kickoff, two teams undefeated going at each other for the current lead in the NUIC South. One team was expected to be here, the other not so much, and that's the beauty of playing high school football and the whole saying anything can happen on Friday night.
It's no secret, just like we were talking about with the Rivermen, the Bulldogs, they've been hot on offense. They have errors that they need to clean up. What can they do to have a perfect game plan going into week 3?
Well, I think, in week 1, it was the offensive line let some defensive pressure through when they played the Rivermen. Last week, they were able to get a very effective offensive line moving forward, but then they played a more of a pass-type offense, and while their defensive rush was great, their pass defense was kind of skeptical at times, where they would play off of the receiver when more times than not, Rockford Christian was looking for the 5-yard out pass just to move the ball down the field. I mean, they weren't trying to go for the home run every play. I mean, really, they went for the home run, I think, twice, and they connected both times. But more times than not, it was 5-yard, 7-yard, 8-yard, and, I mean, they were just very consistent in we're going to hit the short route and keep plugging away, getting the field or getting the ball moved down, and they're very consistent at it. And Aquin was trying to make the adjustments, but for whatever reason, the players weren't making those proper adjustments. As long as they can do that, they're going to be fine. Right now, I think Aquin is the hottest team in the NUIC. They're at the top of our power rankings this week for that purpose alone.
So, Milledgeville, like you said, they're the underdogs, and they have been several times in the last couple seasons. How did they beat Aquin?
Well, I think Coach Roble and his crew are liking the whole underdog role, and again, you're right. They're going to be the underdog in this game, but I think they're really relishing that opportunity, and they're performing. One of the biggest things with Milledgeville is they're very gritty. They're not a big team, but they're going to sell out on you. You know, they're going to come after you with everything that they have, and they're not going to leave anything on the field. If you beat them, you beat them. But they're going to give you everything they got, and that is what is very inspirational about watching the Missiles play. I got a lot of joy watching them last week. I'm really looking forward to this game. This is going to be another one that I'll be attending just to take in and see what Milledgeville can do. I'm really intrigued by the matchup. While I do have Aquin picked in this game, I'll throw it out there right now. I like the way that Milledgeville plays. Obviously, Coach Roble tries to do different things. He does bring in the element of surprise offensively. Coach Digman on defense, probably one of the best defensive coordinators in the state, has been for a very long time. And, you know, when he's playing a cover zero defense, you know he's bringing the dogs. And, you know, you're going up against an Aquin offense that wants to run a pistol option offense, but they're not afraid to throw it deep. So, you know, they're really going to have to game plan a little bit differently here.
Our game of the week takes us over to Orangeville, where we're going to see the Galena Pirates take on the Orangeville Broncos Saturday at 1 p.m.
Yeah, this is obviously a big game for a reason. You have Galena coming in at 2-0, Orangeville coming in at 1-1. Obviously, their loss was to Lena Winslow last week, 22-12, and what was a really good game. Orangeville fought back after being down 22-0 and make it 22-12 with the opportunity to add more, but then close it out. Galena, obviously, one of the highest scoring teams right now in the conference, putting up 53 points against West Carroll, and through the first two games, they've scored 81 points on offense. So, very exciting matchup here. Obviously, last season, these two teams played. Orangeville came out with a 9-0 win. So, on Galena's respect, this is going to be one of those games that's going to test them to see, you know, are they a contender or are they a pretender? Orangeville, on the other hand, this is definitely a gut check moment. You know, you're coming off of a loss. When you come off of a loss, you're kind of reeling. How good are you? Are you as good as you think you should be, or are you just kind of teetering, hoping to play on? And Galena's going to give them a pretty good challenge here.
Well, like you said, Orangeville's going to be a good test. How do the Pirates stay consistent?
I think that the Pirates need to just stick to what they do best, and that is mixing it up. They have been very well balanced so far, year to date. They've been able to get into the double wing and I formation offense, where they've been able to utilize the run game of Peyton Bauer and Isaac Summers and Dulio Mastazuma. And then in the pass game, they've been able to spread it out. They've been able to go 5 wide, 4 wide, and let Ethan Hafel sling the ball around to Sam Hesselbacher and Brady Schemahorn and Connor Bear. And even Jarrett Baston has been able to get in there, and Jacob Townsend has. And I think that, you know, the offensive line play led by Gabe Garcia has been very strong for Galena. Likewise, on the defensive side of the ball, same guys are coming up with impact plays on defense, and they're showing the growth that you thought would be there, but now they're turning it into results.
Orangeville's made a couple of mistakes in the last 2 games. One resulted in a loss to Lena Winslow. The first one resulted in a win to East Dubuque. How do they keep from Galena getting an upset?
Well, you know, it's one of those things where for Orangeville, you got to get your run game going with, first and foremost, Kate Janicki. Orangeville was able to have a lot of success in their trap game against Lena Winslow, which a lot of teams don't have that much success. And Orangeville found a way to exploit that against the Panthers. And as long as they can continue to do that, they're going to be able to keep punching that ball up the gut. Likewise, you know, against a stiffer competition, you got to be able to get your other playmakers in the game, and Chase Jordan needs to be very effective in that role. Orangeville tried to utilize him quite a bit. Lena Winslow did a good job at shutting down the outside attack. Of course, you have Carson Rote and Gunnar Lobdell that can also help carry some of that load. You just got to get a little bit more misperception against some of the tougher teams, so you can have that misdirection, maybe catch somebody sleeping off guard. But for Orangeville, they're not going to smoke you deep. They're going to be that typical plug them and play type offense where they want to get that 5 to 6 yards a carry and keep just pile driving you down the field. Obviously, one of the things that the Broncos need to do is get the pass game going if they can.
What are you taking?
In this game, I like Orangeville.
Between this game and the Aquin Milledgeville game, they would both be exciting games for game of the week. Definitely have to go with Orangeville though.
Well, that gives you a look at the rundown of the games that we have coming up this week in the NUIC. And as stated, we have a great slate of games again. A lot of questions to still be answered, but we're definitely getting some guidance and direction as to how these teams are going to perform. And some big-time matchups here, like we stated. We don't know who's going to win. There's a lot more parity in the competition that we have in the NUIC. Really taking a look at scores around the state, all of Class 1A seems to have a lot more parity this year, which is awesome to see, and it definitely gets you excited for what can become the playoff field when we get to the fall season as well.
Which games are you all taking in this week?
Definitely going to do the East Dubuque game Friday night and against Galena Winslow, and then heading down to Milledgeville for the Milledgeville and Aquin game. And we'll have coverage at the Orangeville Galena game as well with Brandon going to that one. So should be a lot of fun. If you can't, get out to the ball games. If you can't get to the ball games, tune into their website links to catch them, because it's a lot of fun watching these football games right now. A lot of great games out there to be had.
Obviously, you can always listen to them on the radio too. Don't forget that.
Yeah, with all the different times.
Don't fix it.
Exactly, with all the different times, you've been able to listen into a lot of games as well. So you're not wrong there. Or even do something I saw over the internet this past week. Tune into a game on television, tune into the radio at the same time, right? But cheer on the boys. They're playing hard. That's one of the greatest things I like to see about this spring football is how hard the kids are playing, and it's awesome to see. But they're doing a hell of a job. Have fun, and always root for the NUIC.